Hello. Um, so, Anybody that's going to watch this video probably knows who I am. That's why you're watching. But if you don't, my name is Lucy Russ, and I have a master's degree in social work. I'm also a mental health professional in the state of Washington. Um, and I wanted to make some videos on various topics having to do with mental health to not only kind of share my experience and let anybody who sees these videos know that they're not alone, but also to kind of share my knowledge um, to hopefully help um, and um, be of some support. Um, anyway, here it goes. This first video is on a topic that um, unfortunately is kind of on my mind and near to my heart at this moment, which is grief and loss. Um, uh, uh, I recently lost a furry family member, my Australian Shepherd, my 12-year-old Australian Shepherd named Zeke. I've also gone through some family stuff. For example, my dad had a heart attack back in September of last year. Um, and I've had some family, I guess you would say, estrangement. um, but anyway, so I've had some loss recently, had some grief recently. Um, so I wanted to talk about it tonight. Um, so, any conversation about grief and loss, I would find I would want to start with talking about the stages of grief. Now, when we talk about stages of grief, we kind of mean it loosely because these are not necessarily linear stages or stages that once you go through all of them, um, you're done grieving or feeling this loss. Um, that's not it by any means. Um, but because you can go through the stages in any order. You can also go through them many different times. Um, and it's very unique to the person who is experiencing it. So, the first sort of stage of grief is denial. And in this stage, you are trying to avoid essentially the loss or the grief um, or any strong emotion you might be feeling, whether that's through um, kind of completely avoiding what is happening or um, maybe thinking that a loved one's condition is not that bad um, or things of that nature. And it's natural, it's a defense mechanism that we all have. But in terms of healing, um, not necessarily the healthiest thing to experience. The next sort of stage is anger. This can be anger at yourself, at the universe, at someone you view as responsible for the loss or the grief you're experiencing. It can be all of the above. Um, but mainly, it is a response to all of the um, strong emotions uh, that you're going through at the time. And it's kind of an outpouring of all of that. And when all of that comes to a head, what it comes out as is anger or frustration. The next stage is bargaining. Um, this could be trying to make a deal with God or the universe or whatever higher sort of power or entity you believe in, such as, dear God, if you let my loved ones survive this, I will XYZ, something that's going to be important to you. Um, and then depression is the next stage, which is pretty self explanatory. Um, but depression um, is a state of helplessness, hopelessness, um, sadness, um, immobility, kind of being paralyzed by all those different feelings. Um, and then the final stage is acceptance. Um, and this means that you, um, not that necessarily you are okay with the loss or um, the grief, but you kind of are finding the way forward and realizing that this is something that you're going to have to deal with and sort of starting that process. Those are the original kind of 5 stages of grief. Um, but if you recall, I said traditionally there are 5 stages of grief. More recent research has kind of added 2 different stages that some models will include, which are shock, which is kind of the initial um, paralysis, I guess you could say, the initial numbness that comes with um, hearing, I guess, kind of the bad news or about the situation that you're in. For example, if it's the loss of a loved one, the initial feeling of, oh my God, what? Kind of that comes with hearing about that. Um, and another one is testing, which some models of grief include. And in the testing stage, you're kind of trying to find out different solutions. Oh, maybe this would work. Oh, maybe this treatment could come about. Oh, have we tried this, experimental procedure, type thing. You're trying to solve the problem, essentially. Um, Again, that's natural. As human beings, we like to feel in control and in charge of what's going on. Um, However, there are plenty of things in life that, especially as only mere human beings, we can't control. So, again, in terms of healing and things like that, probably not the best thing we could do. Um, so now that we've talked about stages of grief and loss, um, a big, big, big question about it is, how do I cope? How do I deal with everything that is going on? And um, the answer to that is highly individual, and it kind of depends on where you are. Um, in mental health practice, social work practice, whatever you want to call it, I'm a big believer in meeting people where they're at. Um, if you're in denial, uh, that is a kind of a coping, not really coping, but defense mechanism in and of itself. So you're going to be like, coping? What? I don't even have a problem. Kind of thing. However, coping with grief, there are lots of ways to do it. I think first and foremost, letting yourself experience the feelings, whatever they are, is a really good coping mechanism. And do that how you need to do that, whether that is alone, whether that is finding some kind of um, literal support group. Um, there are great support groups for things like chronic illnesses, even family members of people who are chronically ill, terminally ill, things like that, or finding those people in your life that can be your support network. Um, Eventually, things like journaling, um, kind of getting your feelings out from this kind of big, crazy storm that they're creating up here onto paper, um, or onto a screen or document. Um, uh, Doing some kind of ritual, whether it's a memorial service, celebration of life, funeral, doing some kind of ritual that means something to you to honor the person that you've lost, if it is like the loss of a loved one or friend, um, is can really be helpful and is really important. Um, and the reason I say important to you is that it can be individual. It can be something that is only you. It can be something that only you understand or benefit from. Um, it doesn't have to necessarily be a literal ceremony. Some people want that. Some people find that really valuable. Some people don't. Um, Writing a letter uh, to a loved one that you've lost, um, either who has passed away, or like I mentioned, I've had some family estrangement recently. So, um, writing a letter to someone that you've lost can be a helpful thing for people to do, um, even if it's just getting what you want to say and what you feel out and not ever necessarily having that person see it. You can destroy it if that's going to be cathartic or therapeutic to you. You can keep it. Um, Sometimes even having a little conversation with someone, um, even if there's not really there. Um, Now, some people say, "Oh, Lucy, wouldn't that be a sign of mental illness rather than mental health?" Well, sometimes, but not in this case. Um, in fact, there's a technique that I've used with some clients who have experienced loss called the empty chair technique. Um, I've done it with people who have experienced actual loss, like death, or who have experienced loss and the person is still alive. And in empty chair technique, it's basically what it sounds like. Um, One person is sitting in one chair, the client, um, and then the other person is really just an empty chair. There's just an empty chair in front of them, and kind of the prompt for the client is to um, say what they would want to say to this person if they were there. Um, or alternatively, a different prompt is to say, Um, say what you would want to say to this person, um, and they're not here, right? They're not physically here. They can't hear you. So let it all out. Say what you feel. Say what in a perfect world you would say, but might not be able to say to someone's face directly. Um, and again, this is strictly for the purpose of the client to get out these things that they feel. Um, and it can be really valuable and really powerful just to hear out loud you say in your voice these things. Um, and um, My own personal belief system is that if we are talking to a loved one that has passed, we never fully lose that connection. Um, and if it is something that we would want them to hear or hope they would hear, my personal belief is that they do. Um, but I feel like the number one thing in coping with grief, and it's much easier said than done, is to be gentle with yourself, be kind to yourself, love yourself. Um, I think it's important to remember that not all loss means death. Um, it could be like I shared that I was dealing with. It could be an estrangement. It could be the loss of a job. Could be the loss of an opportunity. It could be the perceived loss of an opportunity. It could be a breakup. Um, any of these things qualify as a loss. And it's also important to surround yourself with other people who understand your loss and your grief and what you're going through, and who are going to um, respect your right to handle that any way you choose and respect your feelings. Um, there's also something that I do want to touch on really quick called anticipatory or anticipated grief. And this is when, um, for example, if you find out that a family member or friend or yourself um, is terminally ill, for example, the anticipatory grief um, comes from knowing or anticipating that there's going to be a loss. And this can send us through the stages of grief just as much as when that loss actually occurs, um, if not more so. Because before the loss occurs, there's always that chance, at least in your mind, that it won't. And so sometimes that can make the grief harder when it comes rather than easier. A couple of times is, well, I knew this was going to happen, or this pet was sick, or this pet was old, this family member was sick, this family member was old. Um, why was it so hard when I knew it was coming? Well, there's no handbook. Like a lot of things in life, there's no handbook for loss, there's no handbook for grief. So that's why it's hard. And sometimes there are those little rays of hope, like I said, before the loss occurs that make it seem like it might not occur. So that's why it can be harder. So I just wanted to touch on that. Um, Also, supporting someone who is going through grief or loss. Um, One of the best ways to do that is to just hold the space. And what I mean by hold the space is simply just be there, be available, even if it's just to listen. Um, and just, you don't necessarily need to do anything. Sometimes in big stages of loss and grief, people don't even know what it is they need themselves. So to try to tell you what they need is really, really hard. So also don't ask a lot of questions like, are you okay? What do you need? Blah, da, 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 da. We're not in a stage to be able to answer those questions. Um, it's better, like I said, to just hold the space. Just be someone to hug, be someone to cuddle, be someone to listen when they talk about what they're feeling and um, be empathetic to what they're feeling. Um, Certainly, if they ask for something, certainly, if there's something that you know them well enough to know that is going to mean a lot to them and kind of make them the tiniest bit happy, do that. Um, but again, let yourself experience what you're feeling. Don't shy away from it. Feeling is healing, as they say. Keeping things bottled up inside is never a good idea because it keeps us from truly processing and truly going through and working through what we're feeling. Okay. Um, anyway, that's it for this video. Thanks for watching.